It's midsummer here in New Zealand, the sun's high in the sky, so I've had to move Brutus away from the other side of the property, bring him round here so that I can work on him under the shade of the old oak tree. I've got so much going on here at the moment, lots and lots of little things. Because of COVID, transport and delivery is haphazard to say the least. I'm waiting on a lot of things. So while I wait for them, I'm starting a great number of diverse jobs. One is getting the radiator back together, which involves some heavy soldering. I'm having trouble getting soldering sticks. I can only get wire solder for doing electrical work, which just isn't big enough. Other things I'm held up with are the bracing for under the bonnet. I've asked a friend of mine to do that, and I've waited 2 weeks for him to do the folding, the press breaking of the bonnet inside stiffeners. Waiting to get those back, then I can get the bonnet back on. Having a lot of trouble down the back end getting the rear axle out. I don't want to go cutting through things with the cutting disc. I'd much rather let the things soak for another day or two in CRC and get the things apart of their own accord. I've got brake pipes to make. Every brake pipe on the vehicle was damaged to the extent that it had to be replaced. Some were perforated completely. Having 3 Land Rovers that all need door tops is going to be too expensive for me to buy them. So I'm going to make them. But to make them, I need a special kind of folder. An ordinary folder can't complete the door frame profiles that Land Rovers use. It has to be a special type of folder that doesn't have the big overhead structure for clamping down. They're $6,000 to buy. They have a magnetic base, an electromagnet, several different electromagnets that are set into an aluminium base. When you start the fold, it closes a micro switch which clamps down the work with a very small low profile clamping bar, and that means that you can form box sections over that bar, which you just can't do with a normal type of folder. No way that I can justify spending $6,000 on one of these, but for under $1,000 I can make one. I've got the skills to be able to make one of these things, and I can do it just for the cost of steel and a little bit of outwork. So, with my 60th birthday coming up in 2 weeks, I wonder if you guys would consider dropping a shekel or two into my PayPal account, and we can make this happen. Think of it as Patreon, but without all the constant begging. It'll be a huge asset. It'll make a great series of videos. I've just ordered more Gilsoflex. That's the gilsonite based tarry bitumen-y type coating that I use on everything underneath my Land Rovers. It is a very old formulation of rust preventative. It was used by Henry Ford on the Model T, on the chassis. It's low cost and very, very effective. Once I've got that here, I can repaint fuel tank and look at putting the fuel tank back in. But before I do that, I've been looking at the big cavity above the fuel tank, hoping that I can fit a water tank in there. So I've been looking at water tanks online. I can't find one that will effectively fit the space I have available. So once again, I'm looking at making my own. The chassis on Brutus was galvanised from new, so it's a 35-year-old galvanising job, but it has completely protected the chassis. No work whatsoever was required. But anything that was painted satin black, such as the brackets and the small items in the engine bay, they'd suffered really badly. The firewall itself had been rust-proofed with a brand known as Tectile. There was a little sticker on the windscreen, and it was plain to see where they had been. Where they'd been has survived. Where they've missed, I've had to do quite a bit of work. I put 60 hours into the firewall. But come and have a look at what I'm doing down the back. Under here is the reason why Brutus was taken off the road in the first place. What happened was he broke a rear main leaf in the spring. But because of the captive spring eyes that Land-Rover have always used, you're always able to drive home with a broken main leaf. So Brutus was driven home, parked in the field, and the farmer then just went out and bought himself another vehicle. Brutus stayed there for 11 years. I've been doing a little canvas work in the evening, laying out all the bits for the front flap on the Canopy. It's going to have a curved zip in the front flap, not a window, just a flap that can be folded down to look into the back. And on the outside that's going to have a rain shield to keep the rain off the zip and gutter the rain across and off to the sides. No seam here at the bottom, so there's nowhere that water will come down and sit and soak through. On dusty roads, the Australian boys put vents in the front of their canopies so that they can be opened up and a small amount of air blows into the canopy to create positive pressure to stop that swirl of dust coming in the back and making everything filthy. So they'll have mesh in them. Then these flaps will close them up with Velcro around the edges. The canvas wholesaler just doesn't have the stock that I need at the moment. Everything's on its way. I'm waiting for beige webbing, beige binding tape, and I'm also waiting over here for the vinyl for the seats. I've got everything else. I've cut the foam for the inserts, I've repaired the seats, the foam's all been repaired, the seats are sitting there ready to go. New bases on them, plywood bases instead of the old biscuit board wheat bix that they used to have. Oh, and through here I'm working on the radiator and I'm doing the bonnet braces, and I've done a little bit of work on the tank. I'm about to paint the tank. There's the old bits of the bonnet brace. Still waiting on the guy who's doing the press braking, the metal folding that's folding these into shape. But shortly, it's all going to be a huge rush. There's going to be radiator in, bonnet on, petrol tank back in, and canopy being made. Oh, and seats going in too. The leak has been tested, and apparently it's okay. But I was dubious, so I elected to pull the thing out and have a look on top, because the side seams did look quite rusty, so I was damn sure that up on top where the mud sits it was going to be in worse state. So I drained the tank. There wasn't much fuel left in it. It was a strange colour after 11 years, but clean. There was no rubbish floating around in there. So now I've got the thing out, I can have a look and see what state it's in. Kikuyu grass is a sort of a semi-tropical thing. It's rampant in New Zealand, Australia and Malaysia. If you leave something parked, it just creeps and climbs up through it and gets into all the door cracks and everywhere. So when I picked up Brutus, he was sort of bonded into the environment by this blanket of kikuyu grass. Luckily, I'd pulled most of it out before we fired him up, because we did get a small fire underneath him when we first started it, due to the dry kikuyu grass burning on the exhaust pipe. But we stamped it out and got the thing moved and drove him 500 kilometres back to my place on the back of a trailer. And I worked on the most interesting end first. I wanted to play with the motor, and I wanted to get that rust done in the firewall. The whole reason that Brutus had been parked up for 11 years was because he broke a leaf spring. One of the main leaves broke, and he was pushed into the paddock, and they went and bought another vehicle. So, now I've got this tank out, we can have a look at it. It's the same as most of the look at. It's rather nasty on top. You know what? There's a huge amount of space up above that fuel tank and in front of it. I'm tempted to put a water tank in there just so that I've got one. But right now, it's time to delve into that issue that saw Brutus get parked up in the first place. The broken rear main leaf spring. I've got to get these things off, which ain't going to be easy. I've been soaking all of the shackle bolts and the shock absorber bolts regularly, almost daily, in CRC for the last month. I've wire brushed the exposed threads, and now I'm giving it 450 newton meters of torque from the rattle gun, and it's making no impression whatsoever. So I'm going to have to get in here with a big strong bar and probably a piece of pipe. It doesn't make good YouTube footage, so I think I'll just do that quietly by myself and show you the results when it's finished. Don't you go laughing at the old men noises. It's hard work. You can see I'm wearing this bloody kidney belt because I've strained my foo-foo valve too many times over the last weeks or so. Crawling around on the floor at my age. God, I'm 60 in 2 weeks. I can't get over it. I'm the same age as old people now. Hey, yeah. Yeah, look, hey, working on Land Rovers, it's like this. Every single bolt when you're restoring a Land Rover has either got to be wrestled with or surgically removed. So many of my tools seem to be devoted to removing rusty bolts. I wonder how Land Rover Sophie manages when she comes across things like this. Lovely girl, highly skilled, but all she seems to do is clean things. That's just a bit of good-natured ribbing, Soph. If you're watching, I really love watching your videos. I like to see what you're doing. You are a perfectionist. And you've got a huge future in Land Rover restoration, let me tell you that. 1 down, 11 to go. I've still got the shackle bolts, the front eyes, the shock absorbers, and the prop shaft to wrestle with. It'll all happen in due course over the next few days, saw back permitting. I've been so lucky with this fuel tank. I'm jumping from job to job because at the moment I can't seem to get the things I need when I need them. Once again, I buy a Land-Rover that's in quite a state, but the fuel tank has just survived being replaced. They're well galvanised, they're well designed. The only problem is mud and stuff gets up on top of them and it's very hard to wash out, and it stays wet in certain climates. So Land Rover petrol tanks do take hiding on their upper surfaces. I've just been lucky and managed to avoid having to replace a tank. As I say, the chassis is in fine fettle because it was galvanised. Everything that wasn't galvanised is in a bit of a state. But there is some random stuff going on here. For example, one end of the rear brake line is fairly well like new. But the other end of it is absolutely toasted. Restoring 3 Land Rovers in just over a year has been hard graft. But with my 60th birthday coming up, this is going to be the last one that I do. I'm going to spend some time enjoying having the damn things rather than working on them. But if you've enjoyed my restoration videos, there's only going to be a few more. I'll just be putting the finishing touches to Brutus, and then that's it for a while. But stay subscribed to the channel because I'm going to be doing lots of really interesting stuff. This year I'm going to be taking time out to hunt down some really interesting people, and I'm going to be asking them really simple questions.